Good afternoon, everyone. We're sitting at 2:30, ready to get started. All right. Can I have everybody's attention, please? We're at 2:30 now, and we're going to get started with today's presentation on GIS for infrastructure management. We're glad to have you here today. Looks like a full house, so I appreciate everyone's attendance. My name is Josh Lentz. I'm a senior digital consultant with SAM Surveying and Mapping. I don't know if you're familiar, but surveying and mapping is part of GIS. I'm a subset of our larger firm that's SAM Digital Data Services. So that inhibits our professional services group where we add value to our surveying and mapping teams, which is pure data acquisition. We'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. Quick audience question, though, just so I can gauge kind of what industries were represented here in the room. If you don't mind, now we can speak. So if you're city, government, AEC, raise a hand. All of it? Okay, I thought so. This is my first time here at the North Carolina GIS conference, so not knowing what the audience normally is, it's good for me to understand that. So thank you. Quick overview on the agenda. What we have is just a brief introduction of myself, like I just did. We're going to start with why. I think that's a good question that we all, as GIS people, management, consultants, we always start with why when it comes to GIS. So we're going to talk about the asset data lifecycle, which is an accompaniment for the actual asset lifecycle itself. We're all GIS, IT-driven people in the room, more than likely. We focus on the data behind the assets. Infrastructure management, broad category. We're going to have a lot of time to discuss. I kind of want to hear what you have to say as well, based on what I provide in the presentation ahead. All right, we always ask, why do we need GIS in an organization? A lot of times GIS gets folded into various groups at our firms, organizations, whether that's IT, engineering, operations. We all have some flavor of where GIS lives. As a consultant, we always ask why. As GIS people, you should always ask yourself why occasionally. Why? What are the drivers behind GIS for infrastructure management? Oftentimes, there's something in our organization, a strategic plan, safety, compliance, emergency response, general operations, maintenance and management practices of those assets. And oftentimes, leadership needs to know information about their systems as well. We all know, as GIS users, that it's not just maps. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of integrations behind GIS data, how that data gets utilized. Accounting uses it for depreciation of assets, tracking asset cost, inventory analysis. So leadership uses it to figure out capital investment plans, city planning. There's a lot of uses for GIS in anyone's organization. We see a huge lift in corporate business utilizing spatial data sets to further and grow their businesses as well. So infrastructure management consists of assets. Those assets, we got a little bit of an issue there. Let me start with this. I apologize. We're talking about assets and infrastructure. So infrastructure consists of, typically from a utilities. Thank you. We'll just let it do what it does, and we'll go back to it when we get there. How about that? So what infrastructures? I guess I don't know PowerPoint as well as I thought. So infrastructure is a broad category made up of a lot of different things. Assets mainly is what we refer to them as, from utilities to signage, street lights, electrical grids, you name it. Infrastructure consists of assets. It can be your trucks. It can be your people. People are resources. People are assets within our organizations, valuable assets. So it's hard to categorize things as assets, but as we talk about assets within infrastructure, we have to. We have to have schemas. We have to have data sets. We have to have separation of these different types of assets, classes. So we'll get back to our asset data life cycle now, because that's what us as GIS IT professionals, we drive things off of data. So this is a slide that we came up with as a consulting team. We want to define a single source of asset data quality. We talk about single sources of asset or single sources of record. We all know there's no single source of record in any entity that is the sole source. What we do know is we have to have single sources of asset data quality. When we discuss that, these systems now are highly communicative with each other, from your work management systems, all your MSs, management systems, work order management, customer information systems, you name it. If it's got an S on it, it typically draws from the GIS, or GIS communicates in some manner, statically, bidirectionally, unilaterally. But we really like to discuss what the asset data life cycle is, because it all starts somewhere. Just like an asset gets installed, data then gets collected. So we like to say we create and acquire data. It's not always created. Sometimes we have to go acquire it from the county. So if we need parcel data, if we need 911 addressing, we go acquire that data from another source. So we can also create that data. As GIS professionals, we clean and allocate data. We verify and validate the quality of that data. Good data in, good data out. We all know that meme, if you will, now in the GIS world. Then you have a containment and storing of that data. How do we make it accessible? How do we utilize it? Oftentimes this data sits in a flat file folder somewhere and gets used once in a blue moon, or it's something that gets continually updated and maintained on an hourly basis. So as GIS professionals, we curate and orchestrate this data. That's where you start engaging with data and engaging with users across your organizations. It's up to us as GIS professionals to curate and orchestrate that data in an absorbable fashion, visually, physically, however we're all in a varying stage of our GIS life cycles. So some are still on paper workflows, some are a hybrid between the two, some are fully mobile now. So this still applies. As we get towards the end of this, and this is the biggest struggle that we all have in any organization, is control and governance of that data and the processes and the people that have the ability to edit, manipulate, update. How do we maintain quality data sets? It's probably the biggest question we have, both in your shoes and as a consultant, is how do we govern this? How do we maintain valid data? Of course, this is a big cycle. We're constantly verifying, updating, and enriching these data sets as we work through our GIS organizations. So key aspect is this asset data lifecycle. Now we get to infrastructure management. So everybody has their own GIS definition. My GIS definition from the time I entered into the GIS world as a fresh off the block college kid to now is completely different. I've simplified it. It's too complex for people to understand a lot of times when we're talking to them. So my easy way of saying this is GIS is spatially contextualized data. Every point in this earth is unique in two factions: time and place. Space and time. There's a temporal aspect that makes it even more unique. X, Y, and Z, hours, minutes, and seconds. A lot of times if we understand GNSS devices, signals, things like that, it all works in location and time. We're referring to infrastructure management as any underground assets or vertical assets, above ground assets. So that's subgrade, above grade. We have two. If I'm missing something, feel free to speak up. So there's a couple different approaches to infrastructure management, asset management. what we get to is the proactive approach and the reactive approach. So we'll get through some of these real quick. Can't go into too much detail. We could talk for hours about these approaches, but reactive and corrective management, condition-based management and maintenance, preventative maintenance and management, predictive management and maintenance, and reliability-centered maintenance. Reliability-centered maintenance is a new kid on the block. Not really new, it's new to a lot of our organizations. So a lot of these approaches are gaining traction now. We'd be happy to talk to you about it in depth. Some recommendations for infrastructure management utilizing GIS is start with a standards-based approach. I've done it as a consultant. I can customize this, we can customize that. Extremely hard to manage and maintain over the life cycle of a GIS data set and an organization. We're starting to get into network modeling, your utility network. I'm sure we're familiar with utility networks, something that's growing. I don't consider it a digital twin. It's a very accurate representation of how your systems operate. Traffic, I'm geared towards utilities, but this app applies to anything outside of utilities as well. Network management models, which is actually a step above a utility model. It's organizational network models, so very IT driven. And we're seeing a lot of these digital systems now converge, your ITs, your OTs, and your ETs. GIS is critical for all those systems to receive the spatially contextualized data. So I'm going to open it up now. We have about 9 minutes left. Feel free to ask some questions. Is there anything that piqued your interest in the presentation, or is anybody on their journey to a utility network or figuring out modern data structures? That's a huge, huge trend right now. When I say modern data structures, I mean data lakes, data warehouses, lake houses, those different type of data storage. Anybody have any questions? Any comments? I'm going to pick on somebody. All right. Ari, where are you at with your GIS journey? Enterprise, transitioning?
We're a pretty robust system. We use the city of Greensboro.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty advanced so far.
Yeah.
Are you moving into any utility networks, workforce management, ERP systems?
This gentleman.
Okay.
Zach.
Yes, but not in production.
Okay. All right.
Where water sewer is in test, really trying to integrate our work order management system with that together, and that's what we're holding on right now.
Okay. I'm going to ask you another. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Let me repeat my question real quick. So I asked Ari where he is in his GIS journey. We talked a little bit about infrastructure. Greensboro is very robust GIS as an enterprise, as a city. And then he shifted over to his confidant, who is over the utility group, and they are in the process of transitioning to utility network for multiple utility systems, but is not in production yet. So I'm going to ask another question of you, if you don't mind, because it's everywhere. What was the biggest initial hurdle for transitioning to a services-based architecture and preparing for a utility network?
Cleaning the data, scrubbing the data.
That-
We have a GIS that we think we have 80 to 95% in the water and sewer of what's actually out there in real life. But how clean is that data? How well was it drawn in? Is
Yep.
a huge one for utility network, because it doesn't even
Yep.
know it's even connected, even though you know you connected it.
Yep.
A lot of times.
So even if you're in a geometric network, you don't know, once you get it into an asset package and move it into utility network, whether or not your topology is truly connected. So,
I think the second thing would be is that your data does not look, it's like looking out a window from a different direction.
It is.
Your data is not where you think it is. It
Yep.
is in 5 different feature classes, and you might have a data set of 11, 12. So
Yep.
it just doesn't look the same. So how do you answer questions? How do you service that data up to your customers? Because it doesn't look the same.
it's a huge transition for any utility in GIS. It's a completely different structure, schema, and it's a completely different vocabulary. So oftentimes we have to go through a teaching session where we actually reteach GIS vocabulary around the utility networks. So, all right, we have about 5 minutes left. I don't want to have to call anybody out. Anybody want to share? Maybe that's non-utility related, where they are in their GIS journey, transitioning to enterprise, anything like that? Upgrading to ArcGIS Pro. Anybody preparing to do that? So there, go ahead.
Because they're all already at Pro, and no one's transitioning.
No one's transitioning yet?
I was wondering if you could speak more about that comment about standards.
Yeah. Okay.
In my case, we've kind of stumbled into more and more use cases for different fields, and in some cases integrations. And I'm wondering whose standards should we look to?
Yep. It's a good question. Good question. So the question was, can we speak to the standards-based approach a little bit further? Standards-based approaches are all dependent on what your GIS drivers are at that point. Do you have a compliance requirement? Do you have some type of industry standard? So off the top of my head, Esri is a great standards-based approach. A standard Esri data schema is a great starting point. Secondary, CCTV cameras. So if you're in the wastewater, NASCO, that's a standard, all right? Natural gas, tracking and traceability, F2987. These are all starting schemas. These are things that are actually publicly available. When we say a standards-based approach is, look at those. Everyone has a unique requirement. They have unique drivers within their organizations. They have a unique why. Start with a standard, plan and go through what we like to call workshops. Look at your schema. What can we deprecate? What lives in another system that doesn't have to live in your GIS? What do you plan on 5 years from now on your city planning to do with your IT that might be, okay, we're going to add an asset management system to this. Therefore, we don't need to grow our GIS data schema and build up a robust structure if that data is just going to live in another system. Now, what we need to do is make sure what's there matches your other system, or you have FME workbenches and things, you start adding complexity, reduce complexity. That's the whole goal of a standards-based approach. So it makes it easier to manage and maintain from a hardware perspective, infrastructure upgrades, enterprise upgrades, all these other projects that are going on within your organizations. So does that, yeah. I mean, there's a lot more standards, but they're out there. You just kind of have to do a little bit of work, and Esri's great. GitHub, there's great information out there, GIS communities, stuff like that. So, all right. So I think we're plenty of time for questions. Okay. I didn't cut myself short, did I? Oh, I did. Oh. All right. Well, we'll talk a little bit about SAM. So I'm always going to start with data. That's the forefront of building great GIS systems anyway. We all know that. Getting there is often difficult. Sometimes now, with newer technologies, it's become more accessible, more affordable. Recently, I found out that we're doing 3D indoor scanning. They can go get indoor data way more accurately at a better level in probably, I'd say, 75% less time with one scan. Now, what we have to do now is figure out how do we extract that data? How do we take derivatives off of these scans? I'm a field guy, grew up in the field when you're out there with a GS7X and a laser and you're trying to capture data and stand over it and offsets and all of this, and it takes 2 minutes to get a shot. They can walk through this building and have the front lobby done in 10 minutes. That's a 10-year change. So technology is progressing very quickly, and it's now becoming even more and more affordable. LiDAR used to be something that was completely unheard of unless you're a state organization and you had to have aerial imagery. Now we have people walking around with drones and flying drones, and you can get in the game for cheap. Again, standards-based approach and quality become the issue at that point. So back to your standards-based approach. Mapping standards, GIS standards. There's not just like a association standard. You can develop your own standards internally as well. So this is how we're going to do it across the board, from our engineering group to our operations group, so that you have consistency in your data as an organization. Sam is in several different markets: geomatics, utility engineering, aerial mapping, utility inspection, transportation inspection, GIS, and BIM. I'm fairly new with Sam. My background's always been in GIS and mainly oil and gas pipeline inspection and project management. So our core business is acquiring and collecting data. Our team's job is how do we help create value from that data for our clients that acquired that. There's petabytes and petabytes of data sitting out there on in our clients' organizations. They're ordering the same job to be collected multiple times. So how do we make that data accessible? That's where we started getting into these conversations about modern data structure, indexing data, making it accessible for people across your organization. Yes, GIS is a great visualization tool, but make it a visualization tool that points them in the right direction for a surveyed data set or a scan data set or LiDAR data. There's some really cool technology that we've partnered with here recently, a company called Atomic Maps, and that's their whole basis is storing large data sets and having it accessible. Like, we work with a lot of AEC firms across the nation, and they're constantly calling and asking us out of different regional offices to go collect the same data sets that are 6 months old. So, we put them an interface in, we indexed all their data, and they have a website interface that they go to. Looks just like a web map. It's pretty cool. And they click on their polygon, and there's all the data that's scanned for that entire state, county polygon, whether it's LiDAR data, CAD data, you name it. So think about those interfaces and how your organization accesses data, not solely on a GIS map or GIS data. How are we good on time? We've got 8 more minutes. All right. Anybody else? I'm not going to pick on anybody else, I promise. But if anybody wants to share something, feel free. All right. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.